Welcome to Jack London, Myths, Mysteries, Controversies, and Contradictions. Today's episode, Jack London and Jack Johnson. Part of our ongoing series, Jack London and Racism in America. One of the most controversial discussions of Jack London and racism centers around two heavyweight championship boxing matches. On December 26, 1908, Jack Johnson was matched against Tommy Burns, the heavyweight champion of the world. This was the first time an African American was allowed to compete for the heavyweight championship. The bout, which took place in Australia, lasted 14 rounds and was stopped by the police after Johnson relentlessly pounded Burns. Johnson won by the referee's decision. Jack London, who covered the match for the Australian Star and the New York Herald, reported, "Johnson was too big, too able, too clever, too superb, impregnable. He play-acted all the time. There is no use in minimizing Johnson's victory in order to soothe Burns' feelings. Personally, I was with Burns all the way. He is a white man, and so am I. Naturally, I wanted to see the white man win. Put the case to Johnson and ask him if he were the spectator at a fight between a white man and a black man, which he would like to see win. Johnson's black skin will dictate a parallel to the one dictated by my white skin. But just because a white man wishes a white man to win, this should not prevent him from giving absolute credit to the best man who did win, even when that man was black. All hail to Johnson. His victory was unqualified. Jack Johnson, here's my hand too. I wanted to see the other fellow win, but you were the best man. Shake. But one thing now remains. Jim Jeffries must emerge from his alfalfa farm and remove the golden smile from Jack Johnson's face. Jeff, it's up to you. The white man must be rescued." Jack London is often accused of stirring up race hatred in the upcoming Johnson-Jeffries fight, as indicated by his articles. But the interesting thing is that London in these articles is quite praiseworthy of Johnson. Remember that this was the era of Jim Crow. The newspapers stirred up racism to sell papers and tickets to the fights. The Times would declare before the Jack Johnson-Jim Jeffries fight that it was not a good thing for the two races to meet in any kind of competition, and to advise readers to hope that the white man might not lose. The newspaper said that it would wait in open anxiety that he has licked the, well, since it must be in print, let us say the Negro, even though it is not the first word that comes to the tongue's tip. Even Theodore Roosevelt played a part in the animosity generated towards Johnson. According to Jean Reisman in her book Racial Lives, Theodore Roosevelt, to repudiate Johnson, invited Battling Nelson, the lightweight champion, to the White House as the white champion of the world. In my interviews with Jean Reisman, she stated that the newspapers often edited Jack's work to make him seem more racist.
Jeffries was completely out of shape. He hadn't fought in years, yet everyone believed that he would trounce this black challenger to the white race. The newspaper spoke of racial Armageddon should a black man win this prize. Well, in both cases, Johnson was a very well-educated, very witty man, and during the fights he smiled and tossed off quotations from Shakespeare. People shouted horrific taunts at him, but he never broke that smile. And he talked right back to them, but in an elegant and gentlemanly way. And it's kind of funny that when the train pulled into Reno with Jim Jeffries on it, here's Jack London. He had met Jeffries and covered him and his brother before, and he said, "Hi, I'm Jack London. I'm so glad." And Jeffries walked right by him and gave him the time of day. And so, interestingly, a couple days later, into town pulls Jack Johnson with a car full of bulldogs, musical instruments, women, fancy clothes, lots of wine. And so London went right to his camp and partied with him and had a marvelous time, and even telegraphed Charmian that he thought Johnson would win. On the day of the fight, the crowd was drunk, boisterous, again shouting, the most horrible taunts at Johnson. But he played with Jeffries. He could have knocked him out in the first round, but he just kept playing with him, kept smiling, and he went, I think, 14 rounds, and then just got tired of it and knocked him out. And so the Great White Hope was no more. There were riots all over the country.
In regard to Jack Johnson, London stood out and applauded Johnson's talent, even though London, it has been reported, lost $4,000 betting on the fight and had to mortgage his house to cover the debt. London wrote, "Once again has Johnson sent down to defeat the chosen representative of the white race, and this time the greatest of them all. And as of old, it was play for Johnson. From the opening to the closing round, he never ceased his witty sallies, his exchanges of repartee with his opponent's seconds and with the spectators. And for that matter, Johnson had a funny thing to say to Jeffries in every round. The golden smile was as much in evidence as ever, and neither did it freeze on his face, nor did it vanish. It came and went throughout the fight spontaneously, naturally. There is nothing heavy or primitive about this man Johnson. He is alive and quivering, every nerve fiber in his body and brain, with all that it is hidden so artfully or naturally under the poise of facetious calm of his. He is a marvel of sensitiveness, sensibility and perceptibility. He has a perfect mechanism of mind and body. His mind works like a chain lightning, and his body obeys with equal swiftness." The backlash against Johnson winning was formidable. Race riots broke out across the country. A ban on the exhibition of the film of the fight was called for and supported by Theodore Roosevelt. In 1912, Congress banned distribution of all prize fight films across state lines. This ban was not lifted till 1940. Johnson was hounded by the authorities, and in 1912 was arrested under the Mann Act for transporting women across state lines for immoral purposes. The first arrest was not upheld, but a second arrest in 1913 led to a conviction by an all-white jury, and Johnson was sentenced to prison for a year and a day. It didn't seem to matter that Johnson was prosecuted for acts that had allegedly been committed before the passage of the Mann Act. Johnson skipped bail and fled to France.
Johnson, for his part, had achieved his dream, but he was forever after hounded by the FBI. He was denounced on the floor of Congress. He traveled all over Europe doing boxing matches. He ended up in Mexico during the Mexican Revolution and fought down there.
On April 4th, 1915, in Havana, Jess Willard defeated Jack Johnson in the 26th round and became the heavyweight champion of the world. Jack Johnson's claims that he threw the fight for $50,000 and an agreement with American authorities to return to the U.S. has never been proven. Many boxing experts who have watched the footage of the fight do not believe Johnson's story. The victor, Jess Willard, said, "If he was going to throw the fight, I wish he'd done it sooner. It was hotter than hell out there." Johnson claimed he waited for the 26th round because the money he was supposed to receive hadn't been delivered to his wife until then. In 1920, Johnson returned to the U.S. and was sent to Leavenworth Penitentiary to serve his sentence. Resolutions to posthumously pardon Jack Johnson for his racially motivated conviction passed the U.S. Congress in December of 2015, and Senator John McCain and Harry Reid called on President Obama to take action. Senator McCain said, "Today, the United States Congress has once again spoken, calling on the President to finally take action and issue a posthumous pardon for Jack Johnson. It's past time for President Obama to right this injustice, restore the legacy of a great American athlete, and close a shameful chapter in our nation's history. Senator Reid said, "After more than 100 years of injustice, the record of history must finally be corrected to restore Jack Johnson's good name." On May 24, 2018, President Trump granted a posthumous pardon to Jack Johnson, the first African-American heavyweight champion. To learn more about Jack London and our new documentary film, Jack London, American Original, visit us at www.jacklondonproject.com.